This podcast is brought to you by Radio 786.
We turn our attention now to Iran's operations in the occupied lands, having revealed the failings of the Israeli entity to secure the safety of its settlers. At every turn, even the positions of the Iranian missile launchers have confused the regime. To discuss the military tactics and the dynamics of this battle between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Israeli entity, we are now joined by the Lebanese journalist and military analyst Ali Jazini. Assalamu alaikum, Ali. Thank you very much for your time and welcome to Radio 786. I want to start with looking at the timing of the Israeli attack on Iran. It came just a few days ahead of the renewed talks between the United States and Iran over its nuclear program.
Assalamu alaikum first, and thank you for hosting me. Well, the Israelis at this moment find themselves in a strategic dilemma, in the sense that they became so much paranoid after the October 7 operation. They went on rampage against the whole region. The whole security doctrine, the whole colonial security doctrine that they have, went in from dealing with the intentions. So if like their foe doesn't show intentions, but has capability, they will not do anything. But it switched back to a paranoid and illogical doctrine, to which nobody in the whole region should have capabilities against them, military capabilities, even if they don't show any intention to attack or resist, such as in Syria. So they went and destroyed the arms of the former Syrian army, even before the new government forms, even before it declares its intentions against Israel, and doing the same in Lebanon and now in Iran. They cannot allow and tolerate any nation. They see it as a window before, in this era, before the axis of resistance manages to fix the mistakes maybe that were made during the last war and reconsolidate. And since they have the Trump administration at the moment on the hype, they went for it, despite being a very, very risky scenario for them. If the war lasts, so they try to exploit this very, very short and narrow window. The Americans played along. I still, for instance, despite Trump's threat, I still don't believe that he's going to intervene unless he feels that Iran is weak, or he gets fooled by Israeli intel to actually tell him that Iran is weak. You can just finish the regime. If Iran stays steadfast, I think what he's going to do is just be bluffing. But I still pose the possibility that the Israelis, like they did with the WMDs on Iraq, like what they did with multiple scenarios, will try to push Trump with false narratives that the cost of the operation, the military attack on Iran, if the US did it, it would be so low and you won't have any internal backlash and no economy. It's just going to be a matter of days, so it's over. If they manage to do that and Trump shows this intention, despite the fact that it's going to be very dangerous for him, for the American economy and for his popularity inside the United States, especially that the mood in the Conservative Party is in the more conservative, let's say, populace that supports him don't want foreign wars or troops on the ground again in the Middle East. The only way that he's going to do it if he believes that this is going to be a short attack on Iran. We still are unable to, make the, let's say, conclusive thoughts about what might happen in the next days, but the U.S. intervention might be very, very possible.
What does this attack do for what they claim to be is Iran's nuclear program? We know that the initial assessments do indicate, following the commencement of the attack on Iran, that at some of those nuclear facilities, that they're so deep underground that they were not able to reach it, that we have surface level damage but not an actual leaking of nuclear material or anything like that. If nuclear is the ambit of the supposed attack on Iran, and Iran has repeatedly indicated that it has no interest to pursue a nuclear bomb, Donald Trump is speaking from Israeli crypt notes at the moment, claiming and doubling down on this claim that Iran is seeking to build a nuclear bomb. Do you believe that is the ambit really of these attacks? What does an end goal or an objective look like for Israel?
I don't really think it has to do anything with the nuclear bomb. There are Israeli security interests, here, military interests, that they need to subjugate the whole region and be the sole hegemon and the sole link to the US and this region. So they be the police force in enforcing the American hegemony when the US is going to go to eventually to face China. The point is that Trump's strategy against Russia, with sweet-talking Putin without offering anything substantial, failed miserably. So the talks have halted, went to a halt. With the Chinese, he had to back down on the whole tariff war he had because he discovered he doesn't have neither the political capital nor the real capital, the economic capital to actually go with it. It caused major backlash inside the United States. So he have at least to finish, according to what he thinks, is one important file. So to isolate, it's more than just Iran. It's about isolating the whole multipolar forces from the Middle East to control it, to control the whole of the oil industry inside the Middle East, to actually have a chokehold on China and to be able to later on doesn't have the need to check Iran, doesn't have the need to check the resistance forces, so he can move troops freely later on to China. The point is either that he's going to try, according to him, I'm not saying that they're going to be successful. In his head, he's either going to try to go for a regime change to get like an allied regime, or he will try to make Iran a failed state like any others, and maybe try to divide it into multiple states. That's the end goal. The end goal is not to push Iran to sign a nuclear deal. The end goal is to get rid of the last bastion of resistance from the Middle East, so the United States can, put more resources against Russia and against China, so it can has a better grip around the globe. It needs at least to finish one of the three fronts, which has one of the three major allies it has in the world, which is Ukraine. In Europe, we have the Israeli entity here, and then we have Taiwan. So it cannot focus simultaneously on all of them. It needs at least, to isolate one of them. If inshallah, the Iranians will be victorious in this battle, this is a major shift and major blow to the American hegemony around the world, and it will signal the end of the Israeli colonization, the start of the end of the Israeli colonization of Palestine and the hegemony of the US in the Middle East or West Asia.
In terms of the assessments around militarily, how one understands, again, timing and method of attack. Of course, there were accounts that these are fighter jets that are passing through, Syrian, Lebanese airspace over Iraq, and then, going to Tehran and in different parts of these initial six locations that were bombed. Israel is talking now about having established a clear air corridor through which these attacks are taking place. Notwithstanding Jordan, of course, shooting down drones and weapons and that sort of thing, and the Arab treachery that is on display. I'll come to that a bit later, but I want to deal here with the ability of Israel to supposedly have an air superiority in terms of fighter jets over Iran's largely missile response. How do you read the way in which the war is being fought?
I see that claim to be completely unrealistic, because I'll explain in a few points. Point is, at the moment, we have no visual evidence, even from the Israeli strikes they post. They have no visual evidence of Israeli planes deep inside Iranian territories. What they are using basically are Golden Horizon / Blue Sparrow air-launched ballistic missile, which ranges 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers. So basically what they're doing, they're launching them either from the border region with Iraq or from Iraqi airspace even, and hitting targets. You can see the explosion patterns. There are many boosters that have been found in Iraq, indicates employing such munition. They might be using cruise missiles with the range of like the so-called icebreaker or the Delilah with 350 kilometers range, Or speculations indicate that they had a drone that the US, actually during the Biden administration, they have uncovered with the security leak and before the Operation True Promise 2, that the Israelis possess a secretive stealth drone with bombing capabilities that it can carry miniature cruise missiles and then go inside Iran, bomb like in Isfahan, and then there will be no risk to the Israeli pilots or the Israeli aviation. At this moment, we cannot see, like we see a lot of Israeli drones, like we saw, for example, an Israeli drone in the border region. Now photos have been taken. Just moments ago, the Iranian armed forces announced that they shot down a drone with this exact type in that region. This is war, stuff happened. But in the sense that you have to see planes to actually judge that, okay, this is air superiority. So they are still employing heavily Mossad assets because we see some strikes also been published. The Israelis exaggerate the numbers a lot, but we see some strikes that have been done against some AD systems, air defense systems, some launchers, but you see the explosions are miniature. Indicating 1 to 2 kilograms of explosive, which means they either have some kind of the quadcopter drones that operate within 5 to 10 kilometers, depending on the transceiver they have inside Iranian territory, and they're operated by either Mossad agents or local collaborators. We have ATGMs, but the explosions do not indicate in any way that this is a big bomb, a big Air Force bomb. From the GBU type or the BLU type or whatsoever. So it's a big, massive campaign. I'm not saying there hasn't been any penetration to around, the border areas in Iran. It's a very, very mountainous, especially in the north western side of the Iranian countryside. It's a big, big mountainous area, so they can actually exploit the presence of some valleys and that block the signals of radars and so on, and the short range, where they can use suicide drones maybe from the occupied Palestine itself to open some gaps. But entering the Iranian airspace so deep seems to be such a, without even one citizen actually taking a photo. There were many photos. So yesterday somebody posted a photo of an Israeli, allegedly an Israeli F-16, which turned out to be an Iranian F-4 Air Force Phantom. Another one turned out to be a Yak 130 operated by Iran. And so on and so forth. So another example of that is they actually showed, using the same tactic, the quadcopter or the FPV suicide miniature drones, they showed them targeting two Iranian Air Force F-13 in Mahabad next to Tehran. The only issue is that if you look at Google Maps, these planes' exact models have been there since 2022. They are mothballed there. Also, multiple videos showed decoy. So, to sum it up, I'm not saying there haven't been losses. Of course, Iran is fighting the whole West as, the German Chancellor Merz said today that Israel is doing the dirty job for us. So there will be losses, but it's not to the extent that the Israelis are claiming. They are trying to cause a mass panic. They are trying to control the narrative of the war and to indicate that resistance is futile, just surrender, to entice regime change with the least amount of threat to their pilots, to their crews, and to occupied Palestine itself. The longer the battle goes, if the Iranians manage to keep the rate of fire of ballistic missiles for about a week, they will eventually run out of interceptors. Multiple objective and neutral think tanks have pointed out that the Israeli expenditure of anti-ballistic missiles is very, very high. It will run out soon. They even made curves and studies about this. The only thing is that the US is participating heavily using its destroyers from the Mediterranean Sea that are armed with SM-6s and SM-3 interceptors. They are very, very costly, cost between $10 to $20 million each. So even them, they can. They also have a THAAD battery in Al-Naqab in southern occupied Palestine, which one missile costs about $10 million as well. There are about 500 THAADs, according to Pentagon number, that exist globally. So even with American help, it's going to be very hard to keep intercepting. The point is, that is why the Israelis are claiming that this is going to be a 5 to 10 days operation, not because they like to make it a short or just with a for the sake of it. But no, because they will be in deep trouble if the US doesn't intervene in this time. They know they did that. They entered with the intention of dragging the US. They can be very, very in a bad situation after these days. So that's why the whole narrative, the bomb, the info bomb we're getting in an incredible way to make the battle as short as possible for them, because they're gonna be in big trouble in a few days if the Iranians just stay steadfast and keep the launches.
I'll come back to what could be an American response and whether the Americans are likely to get a lot more involved than what they already appear to be on the surface level stuff. But I want to quickly deal with the issue, just to come back to the fighter jets issue. There was, at the beginning of all of this, claims of two jets. I think there were F-16s or F-35s that were downed. There were questions about the whereabouts of the pilots that have ejected beforehand. There were some reports that they may have been arrested. Since then, are there any credible reports to suggest that any fighter jets were in fact downed in Iran that were belonging to Israel?
I have no visual confirmation about that. This might be the case or not. I cannot comment on this. But what I have to say is that even the F-35s, from the footage that has been published by the Israelis themselves, they showed no F-35 being loaded to go and bomb Iran. It's mostly F-16s and F-15s loaded with long-range munitions, such as the type of munitions we spoke about. So even the talk about F-35 being used extensively, I don't really believe this, since even the US still doesn't operate F-35s in a substantial number on its aircraft carrier, the C and B models. So they're still operating F-18s. So it's still fourth-gen fighters. In Lebanon, during the war, I didn't notice any usage of F-35, maybe in a couple of occasions, but the backbone is still F-16 and F-15. So there might be multiple options or possibilities regarding this. Either it happened, or maybe the Israeli stealth drone, the RA-01, the one we spoke about earlier, that's capable of conducting standoff strikes using miniature cruise missiles. Either because it's a stealth drone and the Iranians downed the stealth target, so maybe they mistook it for an F-35. But it's really, really dangerous for the Israelis to send the F-35 deep inside Iran. They can maybe send the drones because they're more expendable. Because the F-35, despite it having, people misunderstand stealth in general. They think it's just magic, you won't be able to see it. But within a certain angles, and using some radars that the Iranians do possess, you can actually see it. If you don't see it from the front, you might see it from the back or from the side, or when it opens the pylon. Or it can be simply seen by the certain, let's call it the electro-optical scanning devices that actually do scan heat and not, radar signature. So an American report, I think it was made by the WSJ, that spoke about how the Yemenis almost shot down an F-35 during the bombings in Yemen. It was the F-35 usage in Yemen also was very limited. Mostly they were using F-18s. It indicates the fact that even in Yemen, they weren't really using radars because the Americans had the upper hand there. They were using electro-optical thermal cameras or monitoring devices. So they probably targeted the F-35 using such technologies, which of course exist in Iran. So there is a big danger still of employing F-35 within deep strikes in Iran. Still might have been used firing standoff munition in the western side of Iran, of course. This is the opening phase. They will try to strike as hard as they can, the Israelis and the Americans, according to the shock and awe doctrine. But still, regarding such statements, I have no confirmation till the moment. But I'm just analyzing the possibilities.
We are talking to Ali Jazini. He is a Lebanese journalist and a military analyst. This, of course, is NRA on Radio 786. Let's now turn to Iran's capabilities. We know that it far outweighs in terms of manpower. Israel, of course, the Zionist entity is, much smaller than Iran, as it were. In terms of air power, there were sanctions that Iran has to contend with, and so that could explain perhaps the disparity there. But in terms of its missile technology and the amount of missiles that it has, let's deal with that, because Israeli propaganda seemingly suggests here that something like 10 or 20 ballistic missiles are being fired at the time, because at the moment Iran is beginning to run dry. They also say that Iran's air defenses is not quite adequate, and they've also targeted Iran's air defenses, destroying some batteries and that sort of thing. What are the facts at play here regarding Iran's capability to able to withstand for quite a long time?
The point is, the Iranians do possess not only the trailed erector launchers that are mobile in the western side of the countries, they also possess a vast number of them in the whole territory of Iran. That's one point. The Israelis are claiming huge numbers that haven't been substantiated. And according to visual data, they claim about 200 strikes, but according to visual data, we can only verify about 10 launches. Iran possesses hundreds of these launches. That's one point. But since the assets that are being used are being dealt with, but haven't been dealt with fully, including the fact that also miniature drones were used. But there were Mossad teams monitoring the highways and the roads. Multiple of these teams have been captured. So probably Iran, based on this new type of warfare, is currently reorganizing. There are a lot of also missiles, so-called missile cities the Iranians have, which are hardened bunkers in the deep of the mountains, which they can fire from inside safe locations without being bombed by the Israelis. The Israelis claim they bombed one of them. We can see visually from the satellite imagery that they bombed the outer administrative buildings, the older high halls that they had outside, which were empty or maybe contain some storage. We see no explosion that could indicate that there were missiles stored inside. If you look at it, if there were missiles stored inside, the whole site would be blown. So these buildings were struck with Israeli munition. But these buildings were there before the Iranians did build the tunnel, the missile-based complexes. The indications that now we can see also there are some holes in the mountains, but no indications that major explosions happened or that they managed to destroy such a thing. The way the Iranians think about this battle is that the Israelis and the Israeli colonial society do see it as an existential battle. They are bloodthirsty now. The way that you can dissuade them from continuing the attacks, such as it did happen in 2006 Lebanon, is when they start seeing that the efforts of the occupation government, the occupation regime's effort to dissuade the Iranians from launching missiles in a longer period of time are failing. That's why when the war fervor and the war support inside the Israeli occupation starts to fade. The point is that this is going to be a long battle. There is a possibility of a major U.S. intervention. So the way the Iranians know that, the way you manage your stocks, the way you actually need to readapt to the Israeli strategies might create some gaps within the numbers of launches. But in numbers previously mentioned before the war, like the Israelis were claiming 2,000 missiles are unrealistic, as the Iranians did have 2,000 missiles in the early 2000s. They probably have much more than that now. Point is, there might be, to sum it up, there might be some disruptions due to the battle tactics and the long-term strategy aimed at dissuading the Israelis to continue the attack. But I don't think the claims that they are making are anyway realistic at the moment, the Israelis.
And support militarily, at least for Iran, at this time, and there were some reports, again, I don't know how true they are, but there were reports suggesting that some Chinese cargo planes, for instance, flew into Tehran, having switched off their transponders. How, this is being reported with transponders being switched off, I'm not quite certain. But you mentioned a bit earlier that for the West and for Israel, these are existential issues, and perhaps giving the impression that they dealt with the challenge in Syria, Lebanon, and of course now Iran within that particular region. But there's Taiwan as an issue. There's China as well, and the sort of hawkish tone that's being taken in regards to China. There's Russia and that particular dynamic. And look, I mean, Russia has its own hands full regarding what's happening in Ukraine at the moment, and that's not quite letting up, in spite of what Donald Trump thought. He was able to convince Vladimir Putin on. And so I'm wondering whether Iran has any friends at the moment, at least not necessarily those in Iraq and those that were part of the axis of resistance, but are there bigger other potential superpowers here that could strategically give a lot more expression than just to voice their condemnation?
That's quite a hard question to answer, because the Chinese cargo planes, the story about them are true, but we don't still know what they transported. Maybe some highly sophisticated telecommunication equipment that are not susceptible to Israeli hacking or something like that because of the provided number. Point is, the Americans have opened totally their reserve to the Israelis, their bomb reserve. There are $300 million, according to a report also, I think, by Reuters, if I remember correctly, that the cost of munitions and fuel daily, this is a huge expenditure. The whole West is fighting against Iran. Chinese still are still following their doctrine of not intervening in any conflict, despite the fact that an attack or a defeat, God forbid, against Iran might signify a major blow to their supplies, to their energy supplies, to their standing in the Middle East. Nobody's going to dare to deal with them. And the problems and the whole situation will move on then to Pakistan. The Pakistanis have showed support, no material support at the moment, but they had showed readiness to support Iran in case stuff escalates, because they also know that Netanyahu is going to come for them as a nuclear-armed Muslim state, and that any disintegration of the Iranian state, God forbid, will mean that Iran will wake up in the states. There are Baluch nationalists in the south. It means that also Pakistan is next to be broken up, and that also might signal that since Pakistan is a cornerstone in this Chinese strategy to go around the American bases in the south of the Indian Ocean and maybe like Southeast Asia, they won't let Pakistan fight it alone. And I don't know if that will apply to Iran in the sense that they cannot allow it. I would seem to think that this question will be answered if the United States starts intervening. I do not think in any way, even if the United States intervenes, they will hand them offensive weapons to attack American troops, but probably or Israeli troops, but probably maybe logistical support, components support, because the Iranians do have a major arms industry, need spare parts maybe later on. Maybe they will also give them air defenses or jamming equipment. I don't see the Chinese support going farther than this. That if the Chinese did realize the dangerousness of the situation, or for them to possibly, God forbid, lose Iran in the future. The Chinese have showed still no intentions of changing the global strategy at the moment, not fight or support somebody that's fighting the United States, despite the fact that the whole situation is mainly focused around them at the end of the day. It's not just about Iran, it's about finishing in the Middle East to go and face China, to have all the resources to face China. So I don't know if they're going to realize that sooner or later. Like, for example, in Russia, they haven't supported Russia with military equipment, but they're bankrolling its economy technically, and it's giving it all the components. It's also, Russia has a major arms industry. They're supplying all the components that have been sanctioned by Western companies to fuel the Russian war machine against NATO in Ukraine. So we could see a possibly similar scenario in Iran. I would seem to think that the North Koreans are probably more inclined to supporting Iran than the Chinese at this
Yeah,
moment.
yeah. It is in our end radio 786. This continued coverage on the Israeli strikes on Iran and the expansionist efforts of the Zionist entity. We're welcoming your thoughts on the WhatsApp line in 0786 10 11 12. You're welcome to reach us on that line. Will the Americans get involved? Look, I mean, they're already involved, and I think Iran made the point of saying that the attacks would not have happened unless the Americans gave their tacit support. When Donald Trump was questioned on whether he cautioned Benjamin Netanyahu against the attacks, he said, I have to be honest, and I'd like to be honest. I did. And he didn't quite expand much further than that. He left earlier this week the G7 meeting a bit earlier than anticipated, and I think that's. Look, I don't think he wants to have the audience of those guys, so there's that particular element as well. But nonetheless, he left it early, saying that, you know, something like 10 million residents in Tehran needs to evacuate. I don't quite know what that means. Some reports suggesting also that that should the Americans get involved, that would be over for Iran. How true is that?
It's not that black and white as people might put it, because Iran has much more missiles aimed at American bases rather than at the Israelis themselves. So that is the start discussion. The thing is, it's about Trump, and I'm not even trying to insult him or anything, but he is a big narcissistic man-child. Only someone like that would actually dare to insult the capital, the civilians of a capital, to evacuate. This hasn't been done. I hardly try to actually remember any instance in history, even in World War II, where this actually happened. Threatening the inhabitants of a 10 million city to evacuate. They're trying, he's using his capital, political capital as the president of the United States to act as a terrorist. This is terrorism, to push the inhabitants of Tehran to leave to cause a regime collapse. He failed miserably in doing this. Multiple videos from Iran indicate that it didn't work, but the fact that he published it and then removed that comment made it even more silly. Trump, I'm not saying that he will not intervene. My theory is that he will intervene if that he gets convinced by Benjamin Netanyahu of the fact that the Israelis do believe in hindering, Iran's air defense capabilities and so on, which is not realistic. If Trump gets convinced with that, he will go in. Point is, there is no realistic way in which he will have the internal support in the United States to get into another quagmire in the Middle East. So if they manage to convince him that this is going to be just strikes, we will not lose anything if you go inside Iran, and no U.S. troops will die, he will do it. But also within the conservative circle, within Trump's supporters, most of them don't really mind bombing Iran, but they really don't want to fight Israel's war. They really don't want to lose troops for Israel. And plus, with the whole ramifications that could put on the already fragile American economy with the risk of recession after the Trump administration tariffs adventure, which failed miserably. So a major hike in oil prices would cause a disaster for the American economy. It will cause a major strife, like why are you sending us troops to die there if, say hundreds of American troops get eliminated within the, the opening phase of the war. And why, most of all, and most importantly, why are you wasting our resources and expensive missiles that we've been stocking for years to face China? Why are you wasting them on Iran? So it actually depends. It depends on many factors, but I would think that he will do that if he sees the cost to be extremely low, or if the Iranians start demanding talks, unironically. If they start backing down, the Iranians, if they haven't shown any intention of, to be clear, to actually go back to the negotiation table. But if the Iranians show weakness, Trump will end. This is counterintuitive, but this is how it works. Trump does back down against strength, and as you all saw in Yemen. He just did back down after making all these threats. He's a big bluffer. He is very, very extremely narcissistic and dangerous, but he is also a big bluffer, as we saw with China and Russia.
Okay, let's deal with where the Arab world finds itself at the moment. Of course, earlier I cited Jordan shooting down the Iranian drones, Saudi Arabia, making statements, but also having their airspaces patrolled to avoid a Yemeni response and opening up that front, against Israel, and pledging, of course, to shoot down those particular missiles. We have Iraq, which has been unstable for the longest time based on what America has created there. We have Syria that it has a new dispensation, one that is increasingly seeming to want to talk to the Israelis and want to have a new sort of an understanding with the Israelis. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on what role Syria is playing at the moment and what has happened there. Together with Hezbollah in Lebanon, that is largely quiet at the moment on account of course, the senior leadership and command having been assassinated. And when said Hassan Nasrallah, at some stage, you recall him having spoken about Israel being weaker than a spider's web. Of course, there was a lot of deep psychological war games being played at the time, and one could argue that there's a perhaps even a real argument to back that up and to give us evidence to that regard. But I want to deal here with the issue of whether Israel, I spoke about an air corridor earlier in a more practical sense of whether there's an air corridor to fight this battle with Iran. But has Israel essentially or opened up this battle by weakening the axis of the resistance? And did it really, take a different shape when we saw the leadership of Hezbollah being assassinated and of course, Syria falling?
I think to start answering the question from the beginning, the Arab world right now, like the Egyptians, the Saudis, the Emiratis, do not want to see the war expanding, not because they love Iran in any way, but also because it would be a major, like the Americans would force them, they have no say in this, they would force them to use their air force, and the American bases consequentially would be attacked, their oil exports will drop, and possibly they would be even, if like there was more participation, the Iranians might consider them party to the war, and like if the Iranian oil infrastructure gets bombed, the other countries' infrastructure might also get attacked. So point is, they are very, very stressed about it, about an Iranian and U.S. Intervention against Iran. The Arab, it's about Jordan. He has basically, the king of Jordan has no say in this. The only important thing for the Jordanian monarchy is to keep the monarchy. Whatever he will do, he will become, like he became weaker internally with the whole support for Israel during its genocide in Gaza. So that's why that makes him even more and more dependent on Western support and Israeli support to keep his throne. So that's why he's willing to do all the concessions, the sovereign concessions that he can. Like we saw even Israeli Apache videos published by Jordanian citizens of Israeli Apache helicopters chasing drones inside Jordan and firing at civilian homes with their cannons while trying to shoot the drones. Some of the homes in Irbid governorate in northern Jordan have been hit. Point is, yes, of course, the axis of resistance has been weakened. That's why the Israelis decided, and of course, the most important part to this is the fall of the former regime in Syria. That is, I think, the most critical part, because that would also have given, the Iranians warning about about the Israeli planes leaving Palestine to go to, because they have the early detection radars. So to sum it all, yes, they see, as I told you in the beginning, they see it as a gap, a time gap that they have to take stuff into hand and to end it all for once. That's according to them. And before the axis of resistance manages to fix itself from the, let's say, the losses that happened in the last period. So point is, it's a very, very, very dangerous gamble, because if the US gets dissuaded from entering, and if Iran manages to withstand this, literally there will be a wave of anti-US inside the region. The whole shift of the strategic thrust that they have been doing will be reversed. Especially if something will happen that happened, but on a major scale. That happened after the 2006 war on Lebanon, when Hezbollah, the Lebanese resistance, won. They became the most popular resistance group and changed the whole mood in the Arab world. So the mood in the Arab world is now everybody is depressed because of what's happening in Gaza, especially in a lot of countries. A lot of people see resistance as futile. So this is not important only as from the standpoint of you need to keep the bastion of resistance alive in Iran, but this will give great hope to all the Arab people from resisting again. This is a thing that's very dangerous for the Israelis and the Americans as well. Because what they're trying to kill now is hope. They are trying to convince the Arab people that resistance is futile and you should always bow down to your master, the Israelis. And there are talks about, how the Israeli colonizers are, better than us, even on a genetic level. So they're smarter, they're always going to win. So such a great victory, inshallah, when it happens, will reverse all of this. It will be the start of the end of the Israeli colonization and apartheid state in occupied Palestine.
This podcast is brought to you by Radio 786.